Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a trauma-informed therapist, life coach and disruptor of wellness norms based in Brighton, UK. This isn't another nice-to-have wellness podcast. Instead, this podcast seeks to redefine what it means to be well in today's world. Here, we challenge the status quo, seek to reunite wellness with social justice and improve accessibility, diversity and inclusivity within wellness and beyond. As a listener, you are not here to passively consume. Instead, you are an ambassador for real, embodied, societal and systemic change in the world. As your host, I stand for radical self-inquiry and being able to have those confronting but necessary conversations so that we can remember our collective humanity at this time. We're here for the revolution and you've got a front row seat. Leah, I can't believe that it is 18 months since we recorded our episode together, How White Supremacy Harms Us All. It kind of feels like yesterday, but also feels like a lifetime ago.
I feel the same.
It's really great to have you back. Firstly, how are you introducing yourself these days for context as someone who hasn't come across you?
Well, thank you for having me back. I introduce myself as an author, an activist, a mother, and depending on the audience, I'll say that I'm a recovering yoga teacher. like we're in some addict recovery program or something. And if I had to pick one word, I usually land on storyteller, which is, I wrote a book, which is a story, but it's also like a compilation of other people's stories and collective stories.
I love that. And yes, I totally align with the yoga teacher in recovery. I introduce myself as a love and lighter in recovery, like I'm in some kind of purgatory or rehab. I'm not quite sure which one. There is so much that I want to ask you, but obviously we are here to focus in on your book. And firstly, congratulations for bringing it forth into the world. The book is called Mum Unfiltered, Maternal, Mental Health and Finding Freedom Through Motherhood. Can you give an overall premise of the book?
So the book, I feel like, has had a gestation period of almost a decade, basically how long I've been a mother. My oldest will be 12 in a few months. And just like a child develops and changes, like the book has, but what it ultimately landed on was a statement, a testimony on the importance of a mother's mental health and how that impacts everybody else in the mother's life, of course, most poignantly and importantly, the children, her children. And when I started writing about maternal mental health, it was more from a place of processing actual trauma of becoming a mother, life turning inside out, mental health challenges, and kind of writing my way to stay centered and present. But I always knew that I didn't want the book to just be that. I didn't want it to be like a postpartum memoir or even my own memoir. I wanted it to be like one roadmap, one like suggestion of how one mother found liberation through going through all of that, which is where the subtitle comes in. And it's really hard finding a title for the book as well, or any book, to distill it to a few words, an entire book. It feels so difficult. But the idea that I wanted to convey was, yes, this is a book about motherhood that's going to be really real. We're going to talk about mental health, which can be pretty intense and often taboo. What I've realized with other moms, even in private one-on-one conversation, we have shared stories and challenges. It's often the case when they get through that, when a mother finds their way out of that postpartum dark period, many don't want to look back. And I understand that, because why would you want to revisit something that was so hard and so sad? And you kind of don't have time because your kid is growing, your children are growing, and they occupy so much mental space. But what I realize is missing in that not looking back is the freedom piece, and I really, really believe that it is through my motherhood that I have ultimately found myself. Like whatever I was mourning, whatever version of myself that I was mourning, that wasn't like the full story of me.
Mm.
A lot of it was like a collection of masks that I didn't even know I was wearing, like a collection of coping mechanisms, like reaction to systemic violence and oppression and all of that, that unless we sit and really investigate all that, like you don't even know that it's leading your life and your psyche, you know?
Mm.
So I just wanted to try to talk about my personal experiences, and they're broken down in chapters that have specific topics or issues, and to be like, this is actually something to really sit with, process, and then go through, because there is freedom on the other side. And the thing that I hope really comes through is that it's not meant to be just about like mom being well. My argument is that mom has to be well in order for the children to be well. And it's not just about mommy time and taking care of me. And yes, all that's important, but I feel there's a much deeper, really, really critical responsibility in us being well, and it's
Yeah.
for the future.
Thank you so much for that. At what point did you decide to write the book? Was there a particular catalyst, or what did that evolution look like?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I've wanted to be an author for as long as I can remember. Like writing and creative writing and English, all those classes were the ones that like I excelled in. And it was just always like a dream, like, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a book? So that was always like a seed that existed. And then I don't even really remember when it started to materialize that I was going to attempt to do this as a book.
Mm.
I did have a blog, and I did have little essays and, like public sharings. And at some point it was like, this can all grow into a book.
Mm.
And I think I resisted that idea for 5 years, probably, just like inner critic and imposter syndrome, all those things that were like, no, 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 what are you going to do? You don't even know how to get started with it. And then it was maybe like 3 years ago that I started taking a stab at writing the book proposal.
Mm-hmm.
It was like there was so much work behind the scenes, quietly on my blog, in my journal, like on Word documents that nobody will ever see, that I probably lost every time I had to get a new hard drive or whatever. But and then it just was like, it became this thing that was like, oh no, this exists, and it is going, and it's just going to happen in one way or
Mm.
another. And
Mm.
like as an author, you have the choice. I mean, there's lots of choices, but one of the main choices at the beginning of any project is, am I going to try to get this traditionally published with a publishing house, or am I going to self-publish? And in this day and age, like anybody can self-publish, and there are lots of people that are incredibly successful doing that. And as I sat with that decision, and maybe this was a little bit like, oh, trying to give myself an out, but I was like, if I can't get a traditional publisher to do this, I'm not going to do it. I just made this decision, and it was sort of a challenge that I had wanted to do for myself. Like, can I
Mm.
get an agent? Can I get a book deal? Can I get a publisher, an editor, all of these things? And I sort of assumed that like it wasn't going to happen, because
Mhm.
statistically, it's really, really difficult to be a first time author,
Mm.
period, But I kept getting green lights. I kept getting the green flags. And so there was a part of me that was like, okay, I guess I should just keep going.
Before we go on, I'd so appreciate you to hit follow or subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, click those 3 little dots next to settings to rate the show. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review, or take a moment to explore how you can rate or review on the platform that you're listening or watching. This makes a difference. I truly believe we need to have more of these conversations to shake up the status quo. We'll beat the algorithm together with your clicks and shares. Now back to the episode. Getting the green lights. I sense what an important book this is in the chapter that I've read. But what do you feel was missing, perhaps, from the motherhood literary space that Mum Unfiltered filled the void on that one?
Well, firstly, like the majority of books on motherhood, period, whether you're talking about mental health or like tips on being a mom, they're written by white people, period.
Mm.
I mean, most of the publishing industry is white. So it's not like a shocker that this would be the case. But even like on social media, when I first became a mom and I was looking for mom accounts to follow, this was like before I really had my racial like awakening, because I spent my whole life, and we've talked about this before, but just thinking like there's no more racism. And anyway, I'm like almost white because I'm East Asian, like I didn't consciously think this, but this is what like, had been fed to me. And so I didn't even know on a conscious level that as I was following all these mom accounts, similar to, I think about all the yoga teachers I took class with, I didn't realize they were all white. And it's not to say that a white mother doesn't have anything to offer, but it is to say that they are unable to identify with somebody who is not white in like a white supremacist world, right? So I didn't know like this was happening when I was experiencing it, but there was something that was always kind of like it came back to, oh, I'm doing something wrong because I'm following what you're saying, but I don't feel right. Like I don't feel good. Why do I not feel, And part of it was just the subliminal messaging of like, you are never going to be happy. You and your child are never going to be happy because you are never going to look like this mother and this child. And I even went to get books and read a lot of books that I, again, didn't know at the time was not reflecting my identity in any even like high level way, like it doesn't, I'm not saying like, oh, I needed to only hear from a fellow Korean second generation diasporic mom, but it's just somebody who has a feeling, a lived experience of just being on the margins in some way or having to assimilate in some way or, any of those things. And that was missing from all of these other stories, all of these other testimonies. And I just was like, where can somebody like me, and there are a lot of mothers that feel marginalized, whether it's based on racial identity or something else, right? Like where are we feeling validated? And it just added to the pain of feeling really isolated as a new mom, which I believe every single mom pretty much goes through. It added to that to be like, I don't even have the resources that I can tap into. Like, okay, I'm getting a book and reading it when I'm still feeling isolated, depressed, and afraid and all these things. That's not the same as like having a village or community, but at least I can maybe feel see myself reflected in someone else's, book or whatever. Even motherhood blog, it just wasn't out there. And I even had this other mom, she's an Asian mother, doctor, and she has a podcast that's just about Asian mothers' mental health. And she reached out to me several years ago because she had come across one of my essays on like a motherhood site. And she had just had her kid at the time and went through a really, really difficult postpartum period. And she was like, yours is literally the only story that I've come across where the person looks like me remotely, And so we bonded over that many years ago. But yeah, it's just like, where are our stories,
And I hear, the amount of layers and depth that would be missing, in a space written by white mothers, and the lack of systemic cultural awareness that you would have experienced within your motherhood journey as well. You describe the book as deeply personal, and your own story is really interwoven into the pages. And what came through for me was how intertwined your emergence into motherhood following the birth of your son, who you call, and I loved this, your warrior partner. How intertwined that was with your own sense of self-actualization, your understanding of your racial identity as a woman of color, and that context within the well-being space that you had been a part of and the spiritual industrial complex. I thought that it would be really helpful for people to understand a little bit about who you were before motherhood and what your relationship looked like to yourself, to your body, to your family, to the world and spirit.
Yeah. This makes me think you were asking earlier how the book came to be. And my identity, my like total like identification with who I was as a yoga teacher was a big part of it, because there's such an obvious tie between yoga, wellness, well-being, and mental health. And you think like, oh, if I am taking care of this piece, then it should all like the math should math, like I should be well. And what was so wild to me was either I'm really bad at my craft, which I've dedicated 20 plus years of my life to, or the craft is something in there is wrong or rotten, But yeah, I started teaching yoga a year out of college. Like I worked in finance for a blip and was so miserable that I was like, I don't care about anything. I can't do another day of this. And I just like quit, not knowing what I was going to do next. But I had already been a serious yoga practitioner for years at that point. And because I didn't have a job, I just was doing more and more yoga. And it was only in a matter of months that I started teaching. I was really young. So I was like 23, 24. It wasn't like I taught on Saturdays once or twice a week or something like that. Like I was teaching full time all across Los Angeles. And I was good at it. Like it was something that just came naturally to me, which surprised me because I was never an athlete. I was never a dancer. I was pretty shy. Um, as far as like doing anything like I was not like a stage type person at all. And there's element of when you're a yoga teacher, you're standing up in front of people and they're like looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like looking at your body, they're listening to you and you're trying to like be graceful and have a sequence that makes sense and say deeply inspirational spiritual things. Like there's so much pressure, but it somehow just like made sense. Another situation where I kept getting green lights. I was this baby yoga teacher and somehow I was getting all the teaching positions I wanted throughout LA, which yoga's been huge there for many decades. And then a few years later, maybe about 5 years into teaching, 6 years, I signed with Nike as their global yoga ambassador. And this was in 2009, pre-Instagram, like pre-brand ambassadors being a thing. Like I was their only yoga person signed on in their whole company globally. And it really changed the trajectory of my life because it enabled me to not have to like teach 25 classes a week because I was getting paid well to do like a one-off event or a photo shoot or an app shoot or something with Nike. And it gave me this outside validation of who I was. And I was always really insecure. Like I really didn't like people looking at my body. And so when I would teach yoga, I would like usually be in baggy clothes. I was never the person that was like sports bra and leggings, even when I was like young and teeny tiny and whatever. I was always weird about that. And so being put in front of Nike in this role was super uncomfortable, but it gave me this validation that I was acceptable. This huge global brand is like putting me in their latest yoga gear and photographing me. And I didn't have the internal self acceptance. I remember like photo shoots, there'd be a stylist and they would want to keep putting up the shorts or the shirt. And I would be like, oh, wait, my cellulite, like, oh, wait, my flab. And I would say all these things and everyone would, of course, be like, what are you talking about? There's nothing there. And I would breathe this like sigh of relief, like, okay, I'm acceptable, And it was one of those things that will feed you for a bit, but because it's not actually penetrating on like a soul level, like I never really believed it. Like I used to go around thinking it's just because I dieted a lot that I looked acceptable to them, or I had all these stories. And so it was really unhealthy because I had this one external kind of way of being, which was like, I'm confident, I have this amazing career, and like I'm doing the thing that I want to do. But inside, there was no embodiment of self-acceptance. And when I became a mom, all of that collapsed because like on a very basic level, you don't have the energy to hold all those masks anymore. I ended up having a traumatic birth with an emergency C-section. So physically, I've never had any other surgery than cesareans, like physically you're traumatized, you're tired. And then all the obvious stuff, you're like, oh, there's a new human here. So I literally, it was like I'd been holding all these masks my whole life and my hands couldn't do it anymore. And so it all collapsed. But there was this like desperation of like trying to pick that all up again, just trying, we'd be like, no. This is who I am. This is what I know to be. But because I felt like from the moment of birth, I had failed, because I read all those like holistic hypnobirthing yoga books. And I was like, no interventions. I'm going to give birth in a pool. Like I'd heard about like orgasmic births and all this stuff within my community. I'm like, that's going to be me or, and like none of it happened, right? I had not even entertain the thought of needing a cesarean.
Mm.
Because I was so terrified of what that would mean to this like perfectly composed sort of external, like person. And yeah, so it all just like it just collapsed. Everything collapsed.
Yeah. It's so interesting. What you said also at the beginning of that, of how everything that you had absorbed within the yoga meditation space had taught you a version of kind of, if you do XYZ, drink your cold pressed green juice, do your yoga, all of the stuff, then you will be happy, fulfilled, enlightened, etc. And then how, when that doesn't seem to match up, it can't be that side is broken. It has to be that there is something within me which is doing it wrong. And I hear so much of that, within your experience of emerging into motherhood, of, all of the ways that motherhood should be, that birth should be, that postpartum should be, and not seeing yourself in it equals there must be something wrong with me rather than the narratives that have been presented to me. And I felt that in the example that you gave in the chapter that I read, where you talk about an experience of returning to your mat 2 months after postpartum. And you said that to your yoga students that you would be back within a month. And you found yourself on your mat. I was like, good luck, Leah. But you found yourself on your mat 2 months later, and what you had expected of contorting yourself into all of the shapes, doing all of the things, just wasn't there. And it was painful and challenging. And I really felt that in that moment when you shared. Can you talk us through that experience and what it illuminated to you about the systemic way that society fails new mothers?
Yeah. I'm crying thinking of that because I think because I had started yoga so young in my teens and I hadn't yet had time to become like inflexible and achy, like, and I actually am hypermobile. Like I have EDS. I don't know if you know much about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So like and I didn't know this until a few years ago. But I basically like I didn't go through the like aches and pains of like touching my toes, like, I mean, a bit, like I couldn't do everything right away, but it wasn't like that intense. So I had no muscle memory of like down dog hurting.
Yeah.
And so after you have a cesarean, you can't exercise for like 6 weeks, right? And I didn't even have the information that the 6-week period is just like about the external like stitches healing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean like, oh, you're healed in 6 weeks, but that's what I thought. I'm like, oh, 6 weeks, everything should be better. So the disparity between my how misinformed I was and like my expectations and then what actually happened when I unrolled the mat was so huge. I can still see myself doing it. It was when we were still living in Hackney in London. And I was like so excited to feel like myself again, to feel like I was competent at something because I had spent those 6-7 weeks like feeling completely incompetent, which I think most new parents do because you're just like, what do I do? And I remember doing cat cow and the searing pain that I felt just from a simple back bend through my like abdominal area. I'm like, what is this? Like, I just really had never felt that before. And then like everything hurting, like I remember just trying to stand in tree pose. I could find no balance in tree pose. And tree pose is like one of the first balancing poses that you do, right? But my core had been cut. Like 7 layers of yourself are physically cut through. So of course, like the balance is going to be off, right? Because it all comes from the center. It just felt like a nightmare. Like it just felt like, where's my practice? And I went through those poses and I remember landing in like supine spinal twist and I couldn't, and supine spinal twist is not a complicated pose. And I just started sobbing because it hurt so bad. Like it really felt like I envisioned like a metal rod, like my spine had become like a metal rod. And I was just weeping on the floor and like, who am I if I don't know, I don't have my practice, And the thing that if I could go back and sit with that version of myself, I would be like, your practice is not like how you do a pose, right? It's not like, can you balance tree pose? It's not like, it is feeling that pain. Like it is like being like, oh my God, yeah, my body was ripped open to
Mm.
safely deliver my son. Like, this is a beautiful thing. And there are scars from that now. And like, to have met that with
Mm.
love and care and patience and like,
Mm.
and I didn't have any of that. Like,
Mm.
I didn't give it to myself because I didn't know how. And
Mm.
I couldn't even talk about it. So nobody could help me. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't ask for help, and because I was so ashamed and
Mm.
beyond shame, terrified. Because
Mm.
I was just like, wait, this is my livelihood.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
my career. What am I?
Yeah.
And so, like, think at that point, I just, whatever real impact my practice had had, which, as much as the spiritual industrial complex is full of shite, those of us that like really practice, like, something magical is happening, right? Like, when you really feel at one within yourself and you really feel lost in your breath and you really feel that, like, there is magic there. And instead of like remembering that, I just became fixated on like, oh no, I can't have people find out that this is
Mm.
what's going on. And it felt from that point like, just like, I wouldn't go back to the mat for, I can't remember, like a few weeks maybe, because it was like too shocking. But eventually I did. And it was just like, push, push, push. It was like,
Mm.
beat myself up, like, get to the point where I can do all these things again. At like traveling with Nike, I think my first trip was when the baby was 4 months old. And like standing up there and being like, everything's fine when it wasn't.
Yeah, and having to put that mask back on so quickly because,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that and sharing it so vulnerably and palpably. I really feel in what you've just shared, the complexity and the layered emotional experience of that. Even what you've named there of like the fear that you feel around this loss of identity, the what I hear is shame of like, what if anyone finds out about this? The grief, the confusion, there's so much emotional complexity within what you've shared there. And then having to mask that so quickly. And it reminds me of was something that I wrote down that really stood out to me of you said we jump into the race of how quickly can I erase what I've been through. And this obsession with kind of returning to
Mm.
getting the body back, getting my health, my mental health, whatever it is, getting back into routines, this obsession that we have of returning to when you've gone over a threshold which is into a whole new terrain. It
Yeah.
really stood out to me, that word erasure there.
Yeah. I mean, I think like this society is always trying to erase the
Mm.
complexity of women's experiences, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever it is, mother or not, just like all the things. And I just, like, you see all the magazines of like, this celebrity bounced back in 6 weeks, get your body back in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, like, and how that would make you a successful mother somehow to go back in time, But there is this fear of generally moving towards aging, right?
Yeah.
There's this fear of the future, which I think we're in this really interesting moment where like there's many of us that are awake and we're saying like we reject what has been. We
Mhm.
reject all of this that has been built on the oppression of most humans. And we want this future. We want to build this like different, more equitable, more just, more free, all of these things. But because we don't know what that looks like yet, we're not trained to be okay with what we don't know, right? Like we
Mhm.
want to control things. Like we want approval from the systems. We want the grade. We want the blah, blah, blah. There is this sort of, well, at least the past I know. It's familiar. Like
Yeah.
it may have all been a lie, but like I knew I survived that. Like I know I survived XYZ chapter of my life by putting on this mask, by whatever it is. And the future is unknown. So yeah, I think like we get lulled into this like, okay, wait, forget about what might be there. Forget about what you just went through and let's go back to comfort. Let's go back to
Mm.
predictable.
Mm.
And like honestly, because it is so traumatic becoming a mom, and so busy, and especially, I don't know the statistic offhand, but the number of like families now that have two working parents, right? Which means some moms are going back to their full-time jobs at 3 months. Their kids like
Yeah.
3 months old, or even less. I mean, some people have even less than that. But so like what you need to tell yourself to make that insanity okay. You don't have time to get to know your new self, like sort of like you got to go back to that, and you got to fit back into your old clothes. Another thing, actually, not even going back to work, but the back-to-back kids. A lot of people have kids like maybe 1.5 to 2 years or even 3 years apart. And that is, your body hasn't healed yet. Your hormones haven't balanced out yet. So I think I have friends who are like laughing like, oh, I've either been pregnant or breastfeeding or like caring for a newborn for the last 10 years straight. Ha ha ha, like, and you don't have time to sit with like what that really means for you, like on all the levels. And so the easier thing is to just erase it. Like, let's just all like participate in this lie that like moms can do it all. We can have it all. It's constantly reiterated in films, pop culture, like in momfluencers too. I have a chapter on momfluencers, and my perspective is like they're very harmful for the rest of us who are consuming this content, thinking like good for her, good for that one mother, but what's the impact on the rest of us who won't ever be able to create that life,
Yeah, and it reminds me a little bit of even within the wellness or spiritual space of pedestaling people that have this perfect life. And it makes us again think, if I'm just like them, then I will be XYZ. But for the vast majority, like literally 99.9% of people, it's just completely unattainable, but then creates these layers of shame, isolation, a gap in where you think you should be and where you are, lack of acceptance, all of the things.
I mean, even just think about the way people get obsessed with getting a pose. Like people really want to do Hanumanasana, right? They really want to do splits. People get obsessed with the splits. And this was a pose that like, I came fairly easily to me, again, with the hypermobility and starting young, whatever. So I knew that you do the splits, you're not suddenly enlightened and like evolved and spiritually anything. It just means you're doing the splits. So like, I'm really thankful to the way I entered the practice, and like, I didn't have this like, oh, if I get to do this, then I will be amazing or whatever. Like that piece of it was kind of pure, like it was protected. And so I could teach from that place too, this place of like non-attachment, and also like, P.S., nothing's going to happen once you hit the splits. Like it means you got good flexibility, mobility, but like.
What? You aren't enlightened when you do the split?
But yeah, it's this thing. People get so attached to like, if I can do this, then I will find my happiness. Then I will blah, 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 whatever.
Totally. You went on to describe part of your story as, you experienced ongoing anxiety and panic attacks for a long time postpartum. What do you understand was taking place within you, or wanting to be seen or wanting to be experienced within that?
It was that, it was like asking to stop and just like see myself. It was like I was running away from myself. I was running away from what my body literally, like, because our minds are really good. It's logic, right? Like we're really good at debating pros and cons, analyzing. That's what the mind does. And so I'm an Aquarius, so I'm like very like everything very logical. And so that's why it was like, okay, follow this, then it should be this, right? Drink the juice, do the workouts, be this weight, act this way, and equals I'll be mentally healthy. And my body was being like, no, like that's wrong. Like you need to get that way of leading my existence out. Like that's not gonna work anymore. And so it was sort of this like war within me of like my mind being like, nope, I know how to do this. I'm gonna take control. But because I was a yogi and a yoga teacher, that control was my body. But it's almost like the body stepped up to be like, all right, you need to take a back seat, like way back at the back of the school bus and like I need to, like take charge. And because it was so uncomfortable and unfamiliar and scary, like I refused to face it for so long until it just really became, it was just like unmanageable. I was just constantly in this state of like fear, because that's what panic and anxiety really is. You're afraid, right? And you're just constantly triggered and it's confusing, but like you feel crazy because, like if you have a close call, like if you almost got hit by that car and your body, your nervous system flares, that's logical, right? You're like, oh, okay, and then it regulates. You're like, I'm safe. That didn't happen. Everything regulates. But it's like that feeling, but there's no car. Like there's no actual thing that makes sense to be in that triggered state. So that state feeds on itself, like desperately searching for the thing. Well, if I feel this way, there must be something. There must be a boogeyman. There must be a tiger chasing me in the jungle, because like the mind can't make sense of why the body is doing this, right? You're trying to regulate, but you can't because you haven't identified the thing that is triggering you.
You shared that it wasn't just the panic attacks that you were having, but it was the waiting in between, wondering when they were next going to happen, and them happening when you would least expect it, or when you were doing something which you wouldn't necessarily expect to elicit the panic attacks. And it creating this kind of, what I felt as kind of like omnipresent sense of dread that you were experiencing, and how that just continued to magnify. This paragraph really stood out to me in the chapter, and I'll read it back. And it was, what I understand now is my deepest sense of self was finally rejecting and revolting against continuing to buy into a world that was not meant for me and therefore was not a safe space for me. No matter how many classes I took, no matter how consistently I meditated, no matter how much I contorted myself, I would always be outside of whiteness. I read that paragraph, and it was, I deeply connected with your words of your experience. And, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that your motherhood journey is so intertwined with the kind of excavation into your racial identity or your racial literacy, let's say. So I would love for you to expand on that paragraph and what it brings up for you.
Yeah, that feeling of, oh my God, everybody in my like life, because pretty much all my friends were yoga related. Aside from my friends from like childhood or college, I just like looked around and like couldn't see myself reflected in like 95% of the people in my day-to-day life. And part of that started with just like many people were not mothers yet. And especially within the Nike community, every year I'm getting older, obviously. And then like the incoming class of trainers and teachers, they're still young, right? They're coming in, they're like 19 years old, 20 years old. Nike started hiring people that clearly had like social capital. And you'd be like, you're 18. How did you sign this contract with no experience? Oh, you've got 150,000 followers, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. So that's all changing. And I'm like more and more feeling outsider. So I think I started to recognize that feeling of being on the outside from that Nike world. I always felt a little like that, but that was exacerbated by becoming a mom and amongst like a global kind of network of 100 trainers, maybe like 5 of us had kids, something like that. And I started just like getting familiar with this feeling of like, I don't belong here. Like, where am I reflected? And it like hit me. I think it was like a tidal wave when I was like, oh my God, I don't belong in this yoga world. I started writing about racism, nothing to do with the yoga world, but just generally racism. And it came because I was looking at the world through the eyes as like a mother of a child of color and thinking about schools and looking around and being like, he's a token, like non-white kid in this space and feeling protective of him. Whereas I could lie to myself and be like, I'm white adjacent, it's fine. I wasn't going to do that as a mom, it became like undeniable. So I'm looking at these spaces that he's in and being like, wow, he looks really different. What's his life going to be like? And so I started writing about racism, and it brought up a lot of uncomfortable conversations with my own friends, mostly almost all Asian friends who, like me, had been like, there's no racism, especially if you're Asian. Again, they wouldn't say that consciously, but that's like how they lived, right? because they have been afforded all these privileges, and you think it's because you earned it because you were a good student and you worked really hard. Like, no, there's all these systemic reasons as to why we're allowed to be in these spaces more than other people of color, right? And I found it so weird that these conversations were so difficult to have with my own friends. And so it was in that moment of like becoming more public about talking about this and butting heads with a lot of people in my life and like realizing this was in all spaces, right? Like that free industry was white supremacy. And I was like, oh my God, that means the yoga world is too. And I was like looking through the website of teacher rosters and being like, I'm the only Asian person here. And just thinking like the disconnect, because yoga comes from the East, the so-called East. Yoga comes from Asia. What does this mean if it is all white people at least in the US? And just feeling like, what world have I been in this whole time? Like it was shocking.
And it's so interesting, to really reflect on how colonized the yoga world is, the wellness space is, and the arena of motherhood is. Your experience of looking for advice, guidance on motherhood, whether through, books, blogs, etc., and that being so white in what you were experiencing. And I'm curious what you feel motherhood illuminated or even potentially healed for you, perhaps that your spiritual journey, quote unquote, before that hadn't touched for you?
I think it's because I see, at this point, I only had my first kid, but it's because I could see his worth, like I could see his worth, and like I was proud of him being mixed race, and especially like looking more Korean than not Korean, and being like, wait, why I never embraced this about myself, like I was so stuck on like, oh, I look so different from my classmates. Like I remember class photos where I'm like, I was always really brown, like literally just brown growing up in California, just because like it literally is sunshine most of the time, right? So I was like always
jealous. It's like pouring rain now. I don't think my skin has seen the sun in about 6 months.
I really, when I moved to London, I didn't know that my skin could go that light. Like it just did. That was the first place I had lived where you just are not getting daily doses of sunshine in a normal way. But I was always this like really brown kid, and like I felt like my features did, and I felt ugly, and like I felt like an alien, not in a good way, Like now I feel like we're happy to be aliens because we're not like asleep in the matrix. But like as a kid, like all you want to do is just fit in, really, right? And it was the first time as a mom seeing like how interesting and amazing and cool and unique my kid was as this like different, I just wanted to be, I honestly wanted to be white my whole life. And I just could see all the beauty in my kid that I didn't see in myself. And I felt, again, very protective and just like, this is a gift, like it's a gift that all of us are unique and individual and different. And what is this like? We should all want to be this one thing. I don't know what would have woken me up if I didn't become a mom, because I had so successfully been in that like game, been in that industry. Just I really don't know. It's kind of scary to think, would I have been just like the gross silent love and light yoga person still otherwise? Like maybe I don't. God, it's like
we all have our very scary alternative timelines of our life, right? I would still be living in Bali, just, I don't know, posting journaling prompts or something at this point, which is also terrifying. I think what's really coming through for me that I'm hearing from you is this like coming to a place of acceptance, because the way that you've described your life as a full-time yoga teacher before you being a mum, there's this sense, and I can really relate to that myself, of like seeking something, chasing something, needing the approval, needing the validation, and that being so tied with your identity as a yoga teacher, as a yogi, to your body, to the way that people see you, to the way that you are received. You then entering into motherhood, and for many people, there being this, I have to get back there because I can't accept myself here. But with you, that wasn't possible because you couldn't shift
back because of the kind of panic attacks, because of the very visceral somatic experiences that you were having. So the alternative road, which you ended up taking was this, well, I have to accept where my body is now. I have to accept where I am as a human right now, as a person right now. And, something that you said in the introduction to the book is that, motherhood can be such a healing road, if we open up ourselves up to the experience of it. And so I really see that this sense of self-acceptance as a theme for you within that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the first time that I've been like, okay, who am I actually? And what can I appreciate and honor and celebrate about myself, and also witness that has been challenging and not so great and all of that, and just be like okay with it, And I think the process of self-acceptance is ongoing. I still have a lot of work to do with that. But certainly, I don't think I even attempted that before because I was too busy playing a role, And so the last decade as a mom, it's been more like just being more real. And also like desperately wanting to be as good of a mother as I can be, as honest of a mother as I can be, and recognizing like I can't do that if I'm not being real with who I am. It's impossible. And I could just feel the cost of that my children would have to pay is too high because I did that for my own mother. So if we're being raised by people who haven't worked out their stuff and who don't know who they are, and the thing is, it's a lie that we need to be perfect, right? It's a lie that you need to bounce back or look this way or fit in your old clothes or do vertical splits or whatever. That's like all a lie. It's all a distraction from what's real, which is like connect with who you really are on the deepest level possible. And actually that frees you up for everything. That makes you more powerful. That like makes you, be that like challenger in these spaces, the intruder in these spaces where oppression and power are really cemented and disrupt that. And so that's why we're told the lies, because it makes us dangerous otherwise.
Yeah.
And so it's wild, like how much it's all tied in with freeing each other and centering children, all the stuff that everyone, like the internet is talking about, right? Like it's time for a matriarchy now. And especially with all the horrendous information that people are finally waking up to that somehow didn't get the message over the last 2 years with Gaza, like the people that are shocked at what's being released in the files. And I think those of us that have been like actively engaged in and speaking against what's been happening in Gaza, we know this is what, like, if Gaza has over 1 million children, literally over 1 million children, and the world does not care to stop to protect, that means no children are safe. What I've realized in my personal life and my becoming a mom and my mental health and all of that, it's directly tied in with this moment in time where people are all just like, oh my God, we need to like break all these systems. And the answer has been like centered the children and the oppressed and the land. That's where we need to start, right? Like that needs to be our core values that we all agree upon. Whatever other values that we, believe in, like that has to be central. And I'm like, that's what my book is about. It's freedom. It's how we all get free and free each other. And the collective is like centering what matters to the future and the most vulnerable. And that was my drive in figuring all this out and being like, okay, I cannot go on like this anymore. I mean, literally I couldn't, because my body was protecting me from trying to go back to like a fake persona, which also like I didn't know was fake. That's the thing. That's the scary thing, is like I really thought that was me, And maybe like it was like one of those things where it needed to happen for that season in life. Like you kind of have to have that like bad relationship to learn stuff about yourself, that kind of thing.
Totally. I really see that within my own journey. Sometimes I look back at kind of past versions of me and I'm like, God, I feel so much like resistance and shame to that version. But then I'm like, but I also had to go through that individuation process in order to find what was there the other side. So I guess that it is the inevitable kind of unraveling of self. I love, what you just expressed there was so beautiful. And, I really hear within that motherhood, if we are able to be or able to kind of open ourselves to the experience and be supported within that experience, how liberatory that can be, and the recentering of children, the recentering of the matriarchal structure within our planet and how significant that is. You said that the book is deeply hopeful, which, I mean, we all need that at this time. So thank God. But I'm curious of, what inspires hope for you within the arena of motherhood and in general?
Seeing people who are not mothers,
Mm,
like as far as like you're not raising children in your household, care so much about other people's children. Like we care about the children in Gaza. We don't know them. We've never met them, but they're at the center of so much, right? This was something that like felt illogical, but seeing the way my friends, my community have come to care about my kids. I used to have this thing of like, oh, well, when you become a mom, you have to make mom friends, right? You become
mhm,
friends with moms in the neighborhood or moms at school. And like, yeah, of course, like you live like a similar day-to-day life. But the thing that's difficult in that is we're all navigating, like trying to just keep our head above water as
mhm,
parents. And so we can't always be there for each other because we're barely there for ourselves. So I felt like for me anyway, there was always something lacking in those relationships. And there's no, again, like no judgment or resentment. It's just we kind of understand, like we can't really be there for each other, And then I continue to feel really isolated in that way. You're already feeling isolated because you're like, I don't know who the hell I am. And then you're isolated because you don't have community. But over the last couple years, just seeing the way that like people actually do care about the children, seeing how many times a James Baldwin quote was shared over and over again, if that was like a
mm,
spell, that was just, I didn't know that quote before. I had never read
I didn't.
James Baldwin. I had never, my like piles of books now are all these amazing Black authors and revolutionary thinkers who my school never presented for obvious
No.
reasons, you know? Even
Definitely
then,
wasn't taught in the British Empire curriculum.
yeah. Like, as my world has really opened up, I'm like, what's wrong with me that I'd never read James Baldwin? And then I came to understand, like, oh, wait, it's all by design that you're kept from. Like, we were only taught Martin Luther King Jr. and like the peaceful version of him, period. That's it, right? That's like
Yeah.
all we really knew. A little bit of Malcolm X-ish, but like not really. But going back to his quote, it just was like, wait, actually we all, there's so many of us that are aligned in this central value of all the children are ours. And so as the parents, we cannot do it all the time, right? It is really hard. For like, should I feel my brain is still like, it shouldn't be that hard. Like, it's like taking the kids to school in the morning, getting them up. It really shouldn't be that hard, but it is. Like, it's exhausting afterwards. And so we need support, even if it's just like moral support, even if it's just like recognition. The number of times my friends have been like, how are you a full mom and also doing blah, 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 blah. And just getting that, it's like, oh, it fills my cup, right? And also being kind of floored that they even see that. Cause I'm like, oh, I thought you needed to be a mom. Cause I never saw other mothers. That's the problem. Is like, I didn't recognize that. I didn't know what that effort was.
Mm,
Um, but we're in such a different moment in time where so many of us care about children we'll never meet and that we'll never birth with our bodies. I think like that gives me hope. And then also just knowing how differently I feel today than I did 5 years ago, let alone 10, 11 years ago. I really felt hopeless at a certain point. I was like, I just couldn't see a way out just to be so clear about what matters to me now and to
mm,
have witnessed my own strength in coming through it. Not that it was pretty or perfect remotely, but progress was always made. And I just have this understanding, and whatever felt so disconnected from yoga to my mental health and to my body, I feel like that's all. It was never disconnected. It's just the way I saw it was disconnected.
mm,
And I can feel that now. I'm like, oh wait, like I'm still best friends with my yoga practice. It just looks different now.
mm,
And I was
mm.
able to separate that from the yoga industrial complex. yoga. One of my previous guests always, she just calls it like yoga land, like Disneyland. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's accurate. So yeah, all these little things, it's all like pieces of the story of healing, right? And
Mm, mm.
I'm like, if I could access that, anybody can access that,
And it feels so special that your book is emerging now. Like you said, I feel like we are in such a unique moment where the feminine experience is being so centered, on a global stage, certainly on social media. I understand the complexity and, obviously all of the shit that we see on the other side of that. But the feminine experience, the experience of children returning to a different way of doing things, conversations around decolonization, it feels like your book is coming at such an important moment. And, I hear so many people say that books almost take on like a life of their own. They take on their own kind of soul journey. And it feels like your book really feeds into having its own soul journey within the bigger soul journey of the feminine experience, the motherhood experience, the experience of children, and our world being deeply shifted at this time.
Yeah. I was thinking that, I think I woke this morning or last night, I was just like, the timing feels very divine.
Mm,
And I remember like the process of getting a book to pub date is insanely long, right? From
mm,
like, I think the fastest possible from when you get a book deal is pretty much like a year and a half, maybe, depending on like how complete your book was when you got the deal.
mm,
Basically, once you turn in your first draft, it's minimum like a year till it's on any shelf. That feels like forever, right? You like turning in the book, it's like, okay, we'll see it in bookstores in 1 year. And it feels almost like, is it going to still be relevant? Am I going to remember what I wrote? Like,
mm,
and there is a lot of the book that as I was going through it, it wasn't like, because I had gone through that moment, like I wasn't in it anymore. That felt like, like the moms mentioned, like who go through postpartum depression, but never look back.
mm,
Like I could
mm,
really understand that. It was a feeling of like, am I just like regurgitating trauma? Like what's kind of like, just like, should we talk about something new now? And especially with Palestine. And I actually got my book deal. It was in 2024. And I felt like I couldn't even talk about it because who cares about a book when a genocide is happening?
mm,
And so there was so much like naysaying in my own head. But here we are now, a couple months out. And I'm like, whoa, I think the timing is
mm.
perhaps like just right.
I really feel that. And you wrote that the book is a nod to the person you needed. And I
Mm,
loved that you saw a sign saying,
yeah.
be the person you needed. And in that sense, it's like the book is a guide to your former self. I'm just curious what leaving message you would like to offer to mothers or listeners or readers.
I think that so much of healing must happen in some kind of bigger than you form, whatever that is. Like, not everyone's an activist, not everyone is active even in their own community. But I have a whole other chapter on therapy, which I did do for many years, just like Western therapy, one-on-one therapy. And it was hugely impactful in managing and eventually eradicating the symptoms. But like, it could only take me so far because healing does not happen in a vacuum like that. Because we're social, we like exist within community. And so I did get to a point where I was like pretty much okay, but still always like looking over my shoulder, like, oh, am I going to get hit with that anxiety attack again? Like there was still like something off. And it's really weird. I can't remember if we've talked about this before, but I don't think I'll ever forget the moment that it was like November 2023 and I was like barely sleeping because I knew nothing about Palestine until October 8th, right? And like
Mhm.
from that moment, I was just obsessively reading, scrolling, being like, I need to learn. Like I don't know, how did I live to my whole life not understanding what happened? And it was obviously devastating and just terrible. I remember like walking to my building and it felt like any last remnants of anxiety like left my body. And I
Wow.
remember feeling like that's weird. You'd think the opposite should happen. And it's not to say that I was happy. I was not happy. Like I was grief stricken and like horrified and felt so helpless and all these things. But it was because I realized that like I really had this mission to do whatever I could to make other people okay. Because that's our responsibility. Anybody who has any bit of privilege, our responsibility is to help those with less privilege, period. Right? Whatever that is, even if it's the houseless person on the street or working at a food drive or whatever it is. And like, it just became so clear that I could no longer waste this precious energy, this limited energy that I have, worrying about like, oh, is that anxiety? Is something going to come up? Because no, the worst thing that I could ever imagine is already happening, right? Like, I didn't know that our world would be okay with babies being bombed. Like was part of the coalition of people we were emailing the White House. Did you know about this movement in the beginning? It was like, here's the president and vice president's email address. Send all the pictures you're seeing from Gaza. And I was like, oh, right. If they see the pictures, they'll stop this. Like I literally thought that. And then it was not long after that I was like, oh my God, no, they know that not only do they know this, they're doing this. It was like, for the first time, really seeing reality at the collective level. And that freed me from all the other stuff that I was trying to control or reach back into the past to, or all of that. It just was like, wait, I need to lock in on the children of the world and the oppressed of the world. And this is the problem, in my opinion, with Western therapy or the way that yoga is taught in the so-called West, is it keeps you navel gazing, just like me, centering me. And like, I get it because so much of us do go through life like not being cared for as a whole human being. And that's all of us, right? Regardless of however we identify. And so that's like a trauma like all humans have, and you need that. But I think like these systems capitalize on that and it takes you to the wrong direction. At a certain point, when you get strong enough, when you have enough, like you must give to others. And that direction of healing, it's the whole thing of like when you give freely, the universe like returns to you in kind or in infinitely more. I think like you have to take the healing outside of your own therapy room and off your own yoga mat and whatever it is. And it actually feels really good. And maybe that is self-serving, but like at least you're helping others in the process. But it does feel really good to be of service to others, right?
Yeah, totally. You referenced in the chapter indigenous ways of motherhood, us being in community, us caring about the collective, and that we're never meant to do any of this alone. Like we are all inextricably linked, and the interconnectedness of that as a priority. And sure, there is a self-serving aspect to that, what we receive, but we're so interconnected that that's totally unavoidable. So yes, centering back into community and collective. Thank you so much. I will put all of the links in the show notes, but what would you like to direct people to just at the end?
Everything's on my author website now, leahkim.org. Like there's a little book section there and all the places you can get the book. I'm really excited that it's available in the UK too.
Me too.
My publisher, Bloomsbury, is based in the UK, so they originate in the UK. So yeah, I mean, everything's just on the website, and I hope people will buy the book. And thank you for accepting my self-invitation to talk about. I mean, we're always like, oh, we should get on a podcast and talk about this. And I was like, oh wait, I would really like to talk to Megan about all of this.
Oh, thank you. Well, I feel honored to have received the self-invitation. I love it. And yes, I hope that we can get together soon for all of the other things that we also want to discuss in this wild landscape of this world through which we're living. So thank you so much, Leah. Good luck with the book. I am so excited to read it. It feels like such a gift to the world at this time. So thank you for being the conduit to the inspiration and for sharing your story so well with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show, all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references, and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.